Good evening. This is a charter school public hearing. My name is President Cynthia Elliott. Today is May 23rd, and this is a charter school public hearing for the Green Tech Rochester Elementary Charter School. The Education Law Subdivision 2857-1 and regulations of the Commission of Education 8 NYCRR Section 119.4 require the Board of Education to conduct a public hearing within 30 days of receipt of notice of an application for a new and revised charter school. The Board of Education of the Rochester City School District is conducting this public hearing regarding the new charter school application. The purpose of this hearing is to gather community input to provide to the SUNY Charter Schools Institute regarding the application. Green Tech Rochester Elementary Charter School intends to open September 2024 in the city of Rochester. Green Tech Charter School plans to serve 137 students in kindergarten through first grade in the first year, and 461 students in kindergarten through fifth grade in year 5. Are there any speakers for this public hearing? Hearing none, this public hearing is closed.
evening. Welcome to the Policy Committee of the Whole. We have achieved a quorum and are ready to begin. I'd like to start with a motion to approve the Policy Committee agenda for tonight. I have a motion from Commissioner Patterson.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Adams. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye? Aye. With any opposed? No, okay. I've been told that Commissioner LeBron will be joining us on Zoom. I will acknowledge her if and when I see that occur. Everyone else is physically present. We have no speakers on the agenda, which takes us to item 3 on our standing agenda items. 3A is to approve the April 11th minutes. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Malloy, second by Commissioner Adams. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carries unanimously. Item 3B, the NYSBA policy recommendations. We have a brief presentation, I believe, by General Counsel Adrian Neal.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Yes, so we do have policy updates from NYSBA this month. I am not going to go in depth into all of them. I'm just going to give a brief kind of overview and discuss some next steps. So the policy update this month deals with a couple particular kind of broad subject areas. The first is emergency remote instructions and school safety plans. And the note is they essentially updated the policies to conform to the requirements of new state regulations regarding remote instruction, emergency closures, and panic alarm systems. Within those, that group of policies, they discuss policy 4765, which is online distance and a remote learning policy. The district already has an online learning policy with some of the provisions. So the specific note for that one was NYSBA updated this policy to reflect state regulations on remote instructions during emergency school closures. Beginning with the 23-24 school year, school districts must include emergency remote instructions plans in their district-wide school safety plans. Offering remote instruction during emergency disclosures is optional. And as I just mentioned, the district does have an online learning policy with provisions for emergency utilizations. The next policy update note was policy 8130, school safety plans and teams. The policy is recommended. The update is recommended. And they noted that NYSBA made minor changes to this policy to reflect new requirements of state regulations regarding school safety plans beginning in the 23-24 school year. District-wide plans must include an emergency remote instruction plan for use during emergency school closures. And as I noted before, we do already have a policy that touches on this. The district also has a policy on safety, that is policy 8135, and the district does already have a district-wide safety plan in place. The next policy reference was policy 8131, pandemic planning. The district, and the note for that one is this is to reflect state regulations similar to the safety planning regulation I referenced above. We have modified this policy to refer to the required emergency remote instruction plan, which must be part of the district-wide school safety plan. So it's a bit iterative. They're just really kind of making or recommending a similar update for a number of policies. And as I said above, district-wide policy on safety is 8135. We also already have a district-wide safety plan in place. And now, part of the work that comes next after we get these notifications is kind of taking an in-depth look, cross-referencing, seeing if there are specific elements of the recommendations that we still want to adopt, or if we want to put it in a different policy. Some of the policy numbers, we have different policy numbers than NYSBA policy numbers, so all the policy numbers will will not align. But that's part of the work that happens at the policy subcommittee. So we're gonna do a further review on these, do some cross-referencing, some cross-checking. I've already done some of that, but some more in-depth work needs to be done. The next general update is regarding Green New York purchasing, and it's regarding policy 6700, that's purchasing policy. The policy is required and the update is recommended. The district does have a policy 6700, and their note on this is we have revised this policy and regulation to reflect the district's new option to participate in the New York State Green Purchasing Communities Program, as well as to reflect existing options to give a purchasing preference for purchasing recycled products. We do have a purchasing policy. I didn't see a specific reference to this green purchasing plan in those policies, so this might be something we bring back to our purchasing department to get feedback, again, through the policy subcommittee process. We do have a policy that I believe we worked on pretty recently regarding recycling, however, which we did get some feedback in that regard. So, but this is specific to purchasing, and I believe that one was specific to, say, technology. So, the recommendation is to bring this back to subcommittee, get input from our purchasing folks. The next general update is NYSBA's policy 432.5, and it is confidentiality and access to individualized education programs and individualized education service programs and service plan. And their notice, we've made several changes to this policy to better reflect state regulations, including electronic access to student IEPs. The district does have several policies, and again, actually I'll read a little bit more about the note. They're saying that with increasing use of electronic and cloud-based applications, we've reviewed and refreshed this policy, revising it to better reflect the requirements of state regulations regarding electronic access to IEPs, notification, training for access. We've also used gender-neutral language and simplified our language from shall to will or must when indicating that an action is required. The district does have several policies on student records and special education. Policy 5500, for example, is on student records and privacy. Policy 4209 is on IEP program developments and policies. So we really, again, need to do a crosswalk to see if there are any elements that typically what we find is we have the recommendations maybe spread out over a number of policies as opposed to all in one place as being recommended here. But we'll do a crosswalk of the policies to see if there's spots that we need to update. And again, part of the work that the district is already been doing through the policy committee led by Commissioner Powell is that gender-neutral language, and again with exceptional assistance from Ms. Travis, is really updating our policies to have more gender-neutral language. The other recommendation, the update recommendation is regarding their policy 0115, student harassment and bullying prevention and intervention. The policy is required, the update is just recommended. Their notice, this policy has been revised to reflect the New York State Education Department's terminology of school safety and educational climate, SSEC reporting system, formerly known as the Violent and Disruptive Incident Reporting, or VADR. The SSEC incorporates Dignity Act, DASA, reporting on harassment, bullying, and discrimination. Some of this work is already happening through the policy subcommittee. I know there have been conversations with the policy subcommittee and our Office of Accountability on this specific element. So this recommendation is the work as it pertains to this recommendation is already being done at a policy subcommittee level. Similarly, there's another update regarding their policy 57110, school safety and educational climate reporting. The policy is required, the update is just recommended. The notice, this policy has been revised to reflect New York State Education Department terminology regarding VADR. Essentially the same note I previously read. And again, some of this language is referenced, again, across different policies for us. So our safe school policy, for example, we'll have some of that. Again, just additional work needs to be done to kind of cross-reference and see where or if we want to update at all. The next note is on NYSBA's policy 8140, on safe school transfer choice. The note on this is districts are required to establish procedures. Take a step back. Under federal law and commissioner's regulations, school district must offer all students in schools deemed persistently dangerous, schools deemed persistently dangerous, and students who are deemed to be victims of violent criminal offense on the grounds of the public school they attend, the choice to transfer to safe public school at the same grade level within a district. A safe public school is one that has not been designated as persistently dangerous by the Commissioner of Education. And again, we do have several policies that deal with student transfers and student withdrawal policies that specifically reference this right. For example, I know this is mentioned in the parent engagement policy as well, indicating that parents have a right to receive information relating to this. And finally, NYSBA's policy 5151, homeless children. The policy and regulation are required. There is no specific update, but the accompanying notes from NYSBA says NYSBA's policy service was notified by SED that several school districts do not have certain required elements in their policies regarding transportation for children under the McKinney-Vento Act. While we're not suggesting that any changes to our sample policy, we are reissuing it in case your district does not have the sections in the policy and regulation on transportation, particularly to mention transportation within the 50-mile limit. The district's McKinney-Vento policy is policy 5110, and the district's policy already references transportation, and it does include the specific information about the 50-mile limit. So for this specific policy, I think the work is already done, and no updates seem necessary. All right, that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. So to summarize, even though we have recently updated many of these policies, they are going to have to be looked at once again. They may or may not come forward with changes, depending on whether those policies already meet the NYSBA expectations and standards. Any questions of our general counsel? If any of these items light a fire for you, feel free to let me know, and I'll make sure that you're aware of when it comes before the subcommittee. Okay? The next item on the agenda is, 3C is a Code of Conduct Committee update. There are no updates because that process is now before the board as a whole. Item 4, unfinished business. First item is student publications, 5220. We brought this back into committee so that you could see the revised language as it was discussed with students at their not their last PLAC meeting, the second to last PLAC meeting, I think. Charisma, do you want to pull up you have the track changes version on the screen, correct?
Correct.
So if we home in on paragraph 4, there's additional language that specifically places responsibility on the club advisor or directing teacher to assure that the publication conforms to our code of conduct policy in terms of, no derogatory speech or speech that harms other students. And that the final approving authority over the policy remains it has to be within the district's educational mission. So as the club advisor, the school principal, the chief, the superintendent, the board, as issues are escalated, our primary mission is to ensure that the whole conversation in a district-guided publication is to uphold the educational mission. Right? We're not writing gossip columns here, right? Are there any questions about this the changes to this proposed policy language? If not, I would entertain a motion to move it back out of committee with these changes. And
Motion.
Commissioner Simmons moved.
Second.
Oh, I heard it from both directions here. Commissioner Patterson was in my right ear, seconding. I should acknowledge that I'm told that Commissioner LeBron is on Zoom, so she should be able to hear the conversation. So I'll ask once again, now that there's a motion before us, are there any questions regarding policy 5220? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, it carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Oh, and we have electronic voting, so I'll give everyone a moment to vote electronically. This takes us to item 5A on our agenda, new business. We have two policies, 3120 and 5153. I'm going to turn the discussion over to, well, let's take 3120 because it's a pretty simple one. 3120 is policy duties of the superintendent. There were a number of changes, terminology, substituting proper nouns instead of pronouns and the like. Are there any questions on the policy duties of the superintendent? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to advance it to the full board.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Malloy,
Second.
second by Commissioner Simmons. Again, questions, concerns? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, it passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, now we're on to, and there's electronic voting if you didn't catch the window. At this point, I'm going to, Charisma, I totally forgot your presentation, your policy update presentation. We'll go through it like rapid fire and
Okay.
then
Did
turn
you-
the floor over to Dr. Turner, okay?
Okay. So I know Commissioner Powell covered a lot with 3120, but for both 3120 and 5153, as always, the same road map was followed, where it went to policy subcommittee, and then it went to the executive cabinet, superintendent and his executive cabinet. Also community input, specifically to 5153, not 3120. And then we did have that policy 5153 come back to subcommittee, and now they're both in front of you. 3120 actually did not follow this roadmap. It went to policy subcommittee and then came straight to the board based on the policy subject. So all of these folks talked about policy 5153. 3120 was the superintendent and his chief of staff, as well as general counsel, and then Commissioner Powell. So as always, meetings were biweekly, and we're following the policy 2410 process. So not to be redundant on what Commissioner Powell has stated, the biggest change is that one of the bullets for 3120, you all just rescinded a policy school calendar. So the language from that was added into 3120 about the school calendar. So you'll notice that there's two new bullets, but that's one of the bullets. And then policy 5153, parent preference, managed choice. This policy has been significantly updated to align with district practices and in alignment with the district's reorganization plan for the 24-25 school year. When I've completed the presentation, I will turn it over to Deputy Turner, who will give you further updates with 5153. And so next steps for both policies, if they were to be forwarded out of policy committee tonight, is that by the July business meeting, the board would vote to amend the policies. And so that is all I have.
Thank you, Charisma. Dr. Turner?
Thank you, President Elliott, Vice President LeBron, Chairperson, and Board Commissioners. It's my privilege today to review and highlight some proposed modifications to Board Policy 5153, Parent Preference Managed Choice, which will be implemented in the fall of 2024. Oh, I got a control. Just to highlight a few things on this section is that this last lottery we ran will be the last time 7th grade will remain citywide. In spring 24, the lottery for 24-25 school year will be zoned for both K and 7th graders. And also, just some of the changes, I know last time we were here, we highlighted that we removed some outdated and unnecessary explanations in the front page, removed the historical context, the scope and purpose, just really felt it was outdated and not necessary for the policy. We're going to take it bullet by bullet as our chairperson requested, and then take a moment to see if there's any thoughts, feedback, or questions. The first point says that the board charges the superintendent with implementing enrollment and assignment of students at all grade level while taking into consideration special focus schools that may have an entry requirement. An example of that would be School of the Arts. Any questions or comments? All right. Second one says the superintendent may alter the attendance zone boundaries once a year if needed after soliciting parent and student input. That section was added at the recommendation of our parent advisory and feedback from our student leadership council members. So we've added in there that after soliciting students and parents input, the superintendent may alter the attendance zone boundaries once a year if needed, and is encouraged to limit seating via lottery in kindergarten, 7th, and 9th grade to 85% of available seats to provide space for families moving into the city. And also, we may adjust the class capacity up to the bargaining agreement limits or any other state limitations. So, for example, our contract in kindergarten is 21. If need be, we can go up to 25, and in 1st and 3rd grade is 22. If need be, we can go up to 25. Really want to point out that if there is a need to alter the attendance zone boundaries, those catchment areas would be redrawn in order to identify home schools of each student within the zone. So this board policy endorses and directs the implementation of 3 student attendance zones model that is predicted on the following. Being mindful of proximity preference choice will be honored except where there is a physical barrier, such as railroad tracks and the Genesee River, that present a hazard, and there is no pedestrian bridge or walkway available to mitigate those hazards. Sure.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I thought we had a question relative to the age or grade when we were discussing that policy.
Number 2, you want to go back to slide 2?
She talked about the bridge here. Let's see, where's she at? I think it's slide 1, right?
Right here, I think you're talking about this one, 3A.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so what's your question?
So my question is, what I don't see is what grades that affects, or what ages of our students that affects. And that was a question that I had when this policy was being drafted a few weeks ago. Does it affect, like, for example, 7th, 8th, 9th, 12th graders that are able to obviously walk through an area or walk by a bridge or some of these other structures or a railroad crossing without that causing any danger to them, or being able to make that decision without any issues?
So right now, it applies to all students.
Okay.
Commissioner Malloy, have a question. Commissioner Patterson.
I have a question. Yeah, thank you. I know that roughly 10% of our students are homeless. What potential impact do you see with this policy on those students? Do the zones still apply? How does that work with managed choice?
That's a very good question that has yet to be asked. So I will definitely allow the superintendent to jump in, but being mindful of the needs of our families in transition, one of the things that's really important is to provide normacy. So we would, unless there was a need not to, by choice of them, they would stay in the school that they're at least for a year.
Fantastic, thank you. That's what I was hoping for. Thank you.
Commissioner Simmons?
I see Commissioner Adams.
Oh, I didn't see his light on. Commissioner Adams, you first?
Oh, I saw his light, so I will go.
Oh, okay.
So on under the managed choice, the slide 4, I think it is, letter C, may adjust class capacity. You know, and when we talk about capacity, we're talking 25 students, which would just not be ideal. What, can you just give me some examples from my understanding of, like, what would indicate that needs to be increased in that way?
Can I field this first? So the idea here, setting the lottery limit at 85% is to make some seats available for folks that move into a neighborhood, you know, over the summer or into the fall. But the concept of overriding that capacity is more about what happens when you have an overchosen school. If more people choose the school than the standard, you know, the 22 students per classroom, if a school is that inviting that folks are clamoring to get into it, there's an expectation that they might be willing to make trade-offs, including a slightly more
Right, they may accommodate a few more students to reach that, and I completely can respect that thought process. Superintendent Peluso, would that potentially increase in the class size in that way? That could take that school from, you know, being this high demand school, you know, increasing class sizes could alter some of the reasons that school is in high demand. So I'm just wondering, you know.
So,
Exactly right.
yeah, agreed. The class size is for planning purposes. They're not the contractual limits to the class size. We have contractual limits for a reason. I can't go over those contractual limits, but we plan on a ratio of 1 to 21 in kindergarten, 1 to 22 in grades 1 through 3, and then 1 through 25 for 4 through 6. Those are our planning numbers. It doesn't mean that we wouldn't go over those. It's just how we operate for planning. So but nothing could go over the contractual class capacity.
Thank you.
Since we did back up to item 2, are there any more questions about the class, the capacity?
Can I have
Yes,
a question
ma'am.
about slide, the first bullet, I guess?
The very first one?
Yeah. So well, I can just ask it. The policy is starting in 24-25, correct?
That,
So, right, that line about district,
you need the next slide, right? The one about at all grade levels?
it's about specialized, it was some language around, yeah, special focus schools. So in 24-25, are you able to tell us what are the special focus schools that you're referring to for 24-25 that have that kind of requirement for entry?
So I think this is meant for our citywide programming and citywide schools, but there are no, besides School of the Arts, there's no mandated process to get to a school. Now, Early College has some meetings, right? School Without Walls has an interview process. But in terms of a selection process, School of the Arts is the only one that has a quote-unquote audition. This provides the ability, moving forward for 24-25, as we reorganize those schools, if there are specialty schools, to have that opportunity for there to be some auditions or selection schools. But those schools have not been determined as of yet.
while we're on this slide, I'd like to call out the underlined phrase, "at all grade levels." I think the most salient reason for this addition is that when managed choice was first created, it only applied to elementary school. We had middle schools at the time, but there was, the school choice committee had not really dared to step into that. They didn't know how to solve that problem. And in the meantime, middle schools went away entirely. Well, we're talking about bringing them back, so it's timely that we would now say, okay, now we're going to make a commitment to apply the same rules to the middle school as we applied to the elementary school.
I appreciate that. I just raised the issue because certain high schools have these requirements for entry, it has a particular impact on other schools. And I want to make sure that if you're going to do all this work to have a new policy for managed choice, that issue is addressed, because it's hurting certain schools and other schools are benefiting. And if there's some way that managed choice can be addressed, I don't know if this language, I still have the process, but I want to make sure the language allows for the fact that maybe in 24, the possibility that in 24-25, we address that underlying issue of certain schools get to pick and select based on their criteria, and other schools don't have that same opportunity.
We did begin with, in this policy, with 2B, 2B on the next slide.
What did you say, 2B?
2B, or not 2B.
Hamlet.
Right, yes, I'm very poetic. Is with the 85% available seats, which means that, we're going to hold seats back so that people cannot fill their seats and allow other schools to not accept people. So there are some, we have addressed that in some capacity with this policy.
Okay. If we can, okay, let's see where we are. Charisma, I think you've gone a little too far with the slide. If you could stop at slide, slide number 5. Yeah, that's the one. Commissioner Patterson had questions about the hazards, and I want to spend a little bit more time on it because I think it's useful to discuss. 3A on this slide is really a definition of what proximity is. It's not something that can be used to manipulate or allow someone to try to get into a different school because of the hazards that exist. It basically says in order for you to have like that weighting that comes with first choice, you have to live within the 0.75 miles as the car drives. Then there can't be a hazard that would, by going around it, would make you have more than 0.75 miles. So there are other parts of the policy that speak to the question of hazards. But in this particular location, it's really just a definition of what is that proximity preference, okay? Because everybody gets one, at least one. If they live within 3/4 of a mile of more than one school, the family can identify which one they want that proximity preference to apply to, okay? And based on, which ones have the hazards, right? They can choose to go around a hazard, or if it's within the 0.75 miles, or they can choose another school. So long as the schools are within 0.75 miles as the car drives, they can apply this proximity weighting in the lottery to whichever school they choose for their first choice school. Okay, and the whole goal is to encourage folks to choose the school closest to them. Okay?
Thank you.
Does that help?
Yes, thank you for the added explanation.
The practice of being able to select ranked schools will still exist. Parents and guardians will be able to rank four schools of their choice within their zone.
Commissioner LeBron, if you have any questions, I'm going to ask that you just interrupt because there's no way for us to see a hand go up.
All right, students will be matched to zone schools by choice of our lottery system, which requires us to assign students to their first choice. And if that doesn't exist, then we go to the second, third, and fourth. Sibling preference will remain. So if there is one child enrolled at a school for the next year living in the same household, we're going to try to put those siblings preference will still exist. Pre-K preference is added if that individual attends a pre-K in their zone. And then, of course, the increase from the 0.5 to 0.75, and 60% of those seats are for those within the 0.75, and the 40% will remain open to those in the zone. To date, we have not surpassed the 60% ever to date. So we don't anticipate that being a concern.
Does that also apply to the pre-kindergarten preference that we haven't surpassed to date?
Well, that's going to be new.
Okay, all right.
That will be new, but looking at our numbers, we don't anticipate. We'll definitely update you if that should occur.
Okay, thanks.
A little bit more about the proximity preference. If a family does not have a school within the 0.5 miles of their residence as the car drives, then the school nearest the residence without regard to zone boundaries, except if there's a significant hazard or barriers to walking, such as river and railroads, the walk zone preference of that family will be honored. And if the school is beyond the 0.75 mile radius where traffic hazards exist, then students may be eligible for transportation. You'll see that's highlighted. Sorry. You'll see that's highlighted in the red because that is a modification to the policy that was added after discussion and feedback, that if that was to exist, that students may be eligible for transportation.
I have a question.
Commissioner Patterson, and then Commissioner Lloyd.
And does that again affect all grades? I think this is the section I was looking for.
Well, the high schoolers get RTS, so that would eliminate you know, that barrier. So I would say it applies to all students.
All right, so again, and we've had this discussion previously, I can understand younger grades or younger ages, but individuals that live within a certain radius that can walk to school that are adults or that are, say, 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, why would that be a hazard for someone that's of that age or in that grade? Why would a railroad track or the river be a hazard where they would have to be transported by bus or asked or request to switch schools? I don't understand that at all. When we're trying to save money as far as busing and, you know, fiscal responsibility and things like that, why would we allow someone of that age that can make a conscious decision on whether or not they're going to walk in front of a train or walk into a river or even fall into a river? Why would we allow or open this up to all grades? I see an issue here, and that's what I said before, where individuals are going to use this to, you know, as a reason to move from one school to another.
Dr. Turner, let me field that one. This particular bullet isn't designed to be permissive, as you suggest. It really pitches the whole question to policy 8400, which is our transportation policy. It doesn't create new rights or privileges. It basically states what already exists, is that there are barriers. And we're not talking about like a single railroad track. We're talking about like the rail yard on between University and East Main Street, or a barrier of that significance. A four-lane divided highway. Those are the barriers we're talking about. In some cases, there are very few cases, but there are some cases of pedestrian bridges, like the one between Harvard and School 15, between School 19 and that rec center there, and the other side of 390. Okay, so there are a couple of places where pedestrian bridges exist. So as the car drives is not the right metric, all right? If someone can walk across a pedestrian bridge, but it's like a mile and a half drive because there are only so many pedestrian bridges you can, or bridges that have sidewalks on them, you know. This doesn't create new rights or privileges. It basically says whatever the rules that are governing eligibility for transportation on the basis of hazard, that's policy 8400, those rules kick in. Those are the rules that apply. Okay? Commissioner Simmons, then Commissioner Adams, and then Commissioner Elliott.
Okay, thank you. So to that same regard, when we talk about maybe eligible for transportation, again, always trying to challenge my thought, because Edison is coming back to mind when we think of a school with
Four-lane highway, right?
37 minutes away because of the removal of the one RTS bus stop. And then when you consider that particular area, which I've driven to several times, there are no sidewalks. And if we add in inclement weather like high snow and unplowed streets, students are forced to now walk in the street or whatever. And these are of school-age students, you know, and then I'm not even going to get into the nuances of some of the other pieces, because we've actually had children end up in bodies of water. So with that, respectfully, how does this impact students in that space that are attending a place like Edison? No sidewalks, no bus route.
So high school through RTS is very different. And so those are things that we're going to have to negotiate through a contract negotiation with RTS, right? They stopped going out there because of ridership. We've already had preliminary conversations. I've reached out to them to see what could be done, but that's going to have to be done through our through RTS and conversations there, right? High school transportation is going to be very different than what we're talking about here for K-8.
Okay, so, yeah, so I understand that's like a different bargaining that would need to take place with the district and RTS for that particular route. Is there any type of supports that are going to be provided in the meantime, or?
So yeah, this is, once again, not tied to managed choice.
Gotcha.
There are things that we're talking about internally to support transportation out to Edison where RTS currently is not running. We have some conversations that need to happen as well internally.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Adams?
So in addition, crossing guards could be an option as well, right? Am I right, as support? Yeah, okay.
President Elliott?
Thank you. This is an area that I have worked on for a very long time, getting our kids to be able to get on the bus. And I know that the state monitor disagrees, but this is an area in which, no?
I don't know what you're going to say.
Oh, this is an area that we fought, and we're still fighting on the state level to try to get the eligibility for transportation reduced to 0.5. And the reason that this has been a passion of mine is because we have young kids who may live just outside of the eligibility requirements and having to walk. I remember I'm in a nightclub, and a parent came up to me, a community person came up to me and said that he knew of a mother who lived on 6th Street, and this is during the time when 36th School was open. She had to put her 3 babies. She had to walk them to school in the wintertime. Now, I'm in a club, and this is what I'm hearing. And so it is those kinds of stories. And not only that, but the crime that our young people, 7th and 8th graders and youngers, are susceptible to when they're on their way to school in these areas. And so having all of our students on the bus, as whether parents may want to drive them, but those that request a bus, I'm in favor of all of them taking the bus, because this is not the time when I grew up, or Commissioner Patterson, when you grew up, or where you grew up at. This is a whole different day where there's crime going on in our community, and it's just not safe for us to walk. And we're hearing about gun violence every day. So while you question that, and that you look at that from a financial perspective, and that's fine, but I'm also looking at it from the perspective that we have to protect our children. That's very important for us. And this is something that I will fight for, because we've had some deaths in this district. And I just don't want us to continue, to have that in the future, and that we're protecting our kids as best as this district can take care of them. And, I would, for me, this is an area that I would venture on having it costing us a little more to save our children's lives. Safety is the issue. All right, thank you.
I believe Commissioner LeBron's hand is up. Vice President LeBron?
Yes, and I want to apologize for the background noise because my dog is playing with a toy right now. So a couple of things. I just always have to remind folks that we live in, even if we're doing 0.75, which I appreciate, attendance is still going to be impacted, because at the end of the day, when you have families having to walk more than a mile to get somewhere, and I just want to point out that I don't have the presentation, which means the public doesn't have the presentation because it's not on board docs. Just want to put that out there and remind everyone that anything we're talking about or presenting, we have to, by law, put it up 24 hours in advance. And so I cannot follow along with the presentation, because as different commissioners speak, the camera goes to there and I don't have access to it through board docs. But back to this point of, we are winter heavy in Rochester, and it's an unrealistic expectation that families are going to walk their children, multiple children, even if it's just one child that attends to school, to get a kid to school. And until we address that issue, we are there is always going to be a correlation with attendance and the weather and our walkers. In addition, I've also advocated that we start exploring community and neighborhood bus stops. So a yellow bus just goes around in a circle and takes kids to the school in that neighborhood, in that community. And I know that we're not there quite yet as we reconfigure, but that as we continue to have these conversations, that we look at other ways to use the transportation resources that we have, with the realistic expectation that the state is not going to give us more money for transportation, and that the rate is what the rate is, but that we just figure out a more efficient way to use the resources that we currently have. And that's all I'll say for now, but if I can have this presentation emailed and posted on board docs so I can follow along with the rest of it, I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Commissioner LeBron, if you look on the agenda of under 5A, there are 6 tabs there. The managed choice policy presentation is the second link in 5A in board docs. I had a follow-on from Commissioner Patterson and then another
Commissioner Powell, I'm going to check, but I text our board clerk who said that the presentation wasn't on because it was just completed. So I just want to put a reminder to the administration, but I will go and check again and refresh my board docs. But when I logged in, it was not on there.
Okay. I can't speak to that. First, Commissioner Patterson, and then President Elliott for follow-ups.
Yes, thank you. First of all, for clarification, I just want to make sure that, my colleagues know that I understand the environment in the city of Rochester and what our kids go through, both, going to school and coming from school. What I'm speaking specifically to are the older individuals that are able to navigate these areas. We also have to consider the obesity rate, within our country. And, a lot of our youth are not exercising or participating in extracurricular activities where their heart rates are raised, and, they're just working on lowering the obesity rate or getting in shape, let's be honest. Just walking to school for some of the ones who can helps in that area. So I think wherever we can help our students with exercise, if that's just walking is one of the best exercises other than swimming. But if we can help the ones who are able to walk, not the ones who are younger and not able to make wise decisions, but I'm talking specifically relative to an age group or a grade where they're able to make smart decisions and are able to walk, but choose, or under this policy, might choose to take a bus.
Keep in mind, we have to draw a line between this policy and 8400, which actually governs our transportation directly. Commissioner Elliott?
Yeah, so just as a response to that, you can't exercise if you're dead. And I'll just leave that there. Again, this is a safety issue. But I would also just like to offer an example. One is that we were over to school, where did we go last? School 17, and one of the issues that they're having at School 17 is absenteeism. And that's because of transportation. She clearly stated that because parents are not sending their children, they're not allowing them to walk, and if they are not eligible for the bus, they're not going. And so that's another reason why we've got to ensure that, we can get our kids on the bus, because attendance is an issue. And I think that one way in which we can reduce the absentee rate is by ensuring that we're providing transportation, because I would argue that even if the superintendent has his staff to go out to, find out why they're not in school, and even, if there are the CPS, issue of educational neglect, parents want their children safe. And if they can't be safe, and we can't provide transportation, they're not going. Thank you.
Any other observations about, what slide are we on?
Commissioner Powell, I have my
Yes,
hand up. I'm
yes,
sorry.
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I just want to just clarify, because I know sometimes the audience is listening and they may not understand like how the policies kind of roll out. But I do want to point out that this policy primarily impacts young kids and families with young kids. Most of our 7th through 8th, unless they're in an elementary school that has K through 8 or K through 12, which is very limited, are on yellow buses. But the older students are all on RTS. We do not provide yellow buses for the majority of our high schools. There are some exceptions with IEPs and so forth. So when we're talking about whether children can walk because they need to lose weight, which I will say this as a commissioner, it's not my place to ever tell a family about their child. And there are other resources in the community, including pediatricians' offices that can address that. I will never, ever comment on a family or a child's ability to get exercise. It's not my place. But I just want to point out that this is primarily, we're talking about pre-K. Well, there is no transportation in pre-K. They're on the bus. This is kindergarten, primarily through 6th grade as the main focus point. Thank you, that's all.
Okay. Any others on the last slide we were on, which was number 8 in the slide deck? If not, I'm going to throw it back to Dr. Turner.
Okay, once again, students are assigned to school based on the address of custodial guardianship. So non-custodial parents, babysitters, or other addresses will not apply or be considered. And students who cannot be accommodated in their first choice, they'll be assigned to their second choice, third choice, and so forth. If their first choice, if they've exhausted the choices, they will be on a waiting list for their first choice only until September 30th. Incoming kindergartners will have the option of wait lists for their first choice and a citywide. 7th and 9th graders will be on a waiting list only for their first choice, if that should become available before September 30th.
And I know that we cannot accommodate like everything. That's why this policy was created. And so I get the first, second, third, and so on. And then I also like the fact that I know that if someone doesn't get any of their choices, that there is an option for a wait list. I am going in the direction of, unfortunately, some families do miss the entire selection process. And again, I know we cannot necessarily accommodate everyone, but then how are decisions made as far as where those families end up being placed? Like they're not on a wait list based on first choice. They just didn't do it. How do we work with those families?
Yeah, so during the school choice process, we make sure that our homeschool assistants, our school counselors are reaching out and, if need be, making home visits, trying to get families to complete the school choice application. And then if we're usually able to get a good number of folks to do that, if for some reason we're not able to engage the family in completing that or selecting their choices, then what happens is once the lottery is placed, then we place those students always with the consideration the nearest school to them and what has availability within that zone.
So proximity and open seats.
Actually, my question was similar. While you're on the wait list, where do you attend school?
So you're on the wait list till September 30th. So families will tend to hold out, right? Generally, they'll say, okay, so we tell them, you're on a wait list for your first choice, but here's your placement if your first choice doesn't become available. So oftentimes, when it gets closer to school, the family will say, take me off the wait list, and then I'm gonna go to the school that I was placed at, right? Because my choices were not available. Sometimes they will attend that school, and if for some reason their first choice is available, they may opt to attend that school before September 30th.
My question is, if you give them those options and they wait, and those are great options to have, that then impacts chronic absenteeism because they may be home waiting for that choice to come
Yeah,
up.
yeah, that's not how it goes.
No.
So.
No, I mean, so you're waiting. Maybe I'm not understanding what
So
you're saying.
let me try this up for you. A family chooses school 1, 2, and 3 in that order.
And they didn't get any of them.
Well, they've got 4 choices. The probabilities of not getting any of them are very low. The rate of getting your first, second, or third choice is 90% or better.
Right, I'm just trying to follow the
Okay.
scenario that
No,
she presented.
right,
So
right.
if
But
you
so-
don't get any of them,
so
where do
you're-
you go to
you're-
school
so
from
you're-
September 1st?
You're most likely, you're
To the
going to get
30th.
placed in a second, a third, or a fourth choice. It's almost never does somebody miss everything, every choice and be assigned to an open seat. If they went through the lottery, that's
But
not what happened.
but that is the answer I'm looking for. So you're saying they get assigned to
So-
a seat?
So they get assigned to school somewhere, right? And
Somewhere.
they stay on that on that wait list to September 30th. If they don't get, if there is no spot available, then we clear that wait list. If something becomes available on September 18th, September 19th, we call that family, say, school X is now available, do you want to train? Then you go to it.
But they're in school from the
Yes,
first day of school?
they're assigned a
To the
school.
30th,
Yes,
or
absolutely.
whatever.
Yes.
Thank you.
One of the, now keeping in mind that we've had school managed choice for a couple of decades now, a lot of times families get their second choice school or even their third choice school, and then when an open seat comes available in their first choice seat, by then, they've often decide that, no, they're comfortable in the school, they've built relationships in that school, and they take a pass on, and then the wait list, they just move down to the next person on the wait list when that happens.
Commissioner Powell.
Yes, ma'am.
So, and this is probably real late in my career in asking this question, but it's just coming to light. So, I'm under the impression that the whole managed choice thing does not work. But hear me out. Does every student participate in managed choice? Have we, or do we just assign students? And how do we assign students? Because it seems to me that we cannot put even, if we've got 23,000 students, it seems to me that we cannot give 23,000 students their choice of schools. You may not, I don't even understand how that first choice, second choice, third choice, I don't really understand if that whole process is a integral with fidelity process, in all honesty. And I don't know if it's ever been, if there has ever been an evaluation to ensure that when our students or our parents are selecting the schools, that they really are adhering to, or that the policy itself is being adhered to, because it just seems we've got too many students and we can't get every student into their first or second choice. So I'm putting that out there, but I don't even know if you all can respond to that. Does that whole process work, I guess, is to sum it up?
So you're absolutely correct, President Elliott. So not everybody gets their first choice, second choice, or third choice. So in that instance, so I watched it for the first time, see how the computerized lottery works. Everybody was in there. I watched it, generate the information so that we're not biased in terms of where we place. So because we also held back 10% of the seats because of the fact that we often get schools that close out, so no, they don't. So what happens in that instance is if your first, second, third, and fourth choice is exhausted, then we do what we would generally do is look to say, what is the closest school? Is there a seat available in that closest school? Yes, perfect. No, then we move on to the next school, and that's how we assign that.
So rather than asking clarifying questions, I'm going to share one of my pet peeves about the way the policy has always gone, and that is if parents don't know what their probabilities of success are, and and the world and the whole community knows what the best schools are, and I put that in air quotes, right? Everyone's going to sign up for World of Inquiry, and then as their first choice, and it goes down from there. Well, if parents knew that the probability of getting into World of Inquiry is less than 2% if you don't have a sibling there, they probably wouldn't waste their first choice by picking World of Inquiry. So the important data isn't just, is it a safe school? Does it have high ELA math scores at 4th grade? Another important ingredient that parents really must know is what, based on previous year's lottery, what's your probability of success at getting it as your first choice school? If the entire building is filled up with siblings, and because World of Inquiry is a K through 12, there are many, many more chances for siblings to get in than for the outside world to get in. That's a prime case of where if a family knew what that the main obstacle is that other people's siblings are more, have something closer to a guarantee than someone who doesn't, they might as well make different choices. And knowledge is power, right? If your chances of getting your first choice are better if you take a pass on schools that are historically overchosen. And I see I've triggered a question with Commissioner Malloy, and Madam President, is your mic hot?
Well, I'm sort of just processing what you're saying because I think that there's some credibility in what you're saying. The answer to it, I don't know. So I'm just sort of pondering.
Okay.
I think, Superintendent, you want to follow through?
I also want to say this is why reconfiguration is important, right? Because if you have K-8 buildings, and you have K-6 buildings, and you have 9-12 buildings, but mostly we're talking about our K-8 students. So if I'm a K-6 building transitioning from 6 to 7, and I'm choosing those 7-8 buildings or choosing those K-8 buildings to go into 7th grade, those kids automatically roll up, and then there's fewer seats available for 7-8, right? So then if all families that are going K-6, 7-8 choose those K-8 buildings, you start to get, you see where they're not going to be able to get their choices, right? So once you reconfigure, and once we reconfigure our organization, right, everyone from K-6 is going to 7-8, it helps with that transitional that it is. Remember, these are for K and 7 right now. It's really important for our kindergarten. And that's where we did an all-out campaign this year. We had the most participation in our lottery than we've had ever. Probably not where we need to be, right, in getting everyone, but this is something that we got to continue to, promote, tell parents, choose their schools, get this stuff done so that we're able to run a lottery that has everyone involved.
So that just one more follow-up. So does the managed choice policy make sense?
Yeah, it does if you're configured holistically the right way, right? We're going to a K-6, 7, 8, 9, 12, right? If we've changed some parameters here with, our, 0.75 from, to extend that neighborhood zone. And so that kind of fits a little bit more of where we are with some school closures in the past, what schools we have closed, all that to expand that. That may need to, over time, continue to expand as we keep on revisiting the policy. But from a K point, I think it's really important, and then in 7th grade it will continue. Once again, that's if we don't configure 7 and 8 buildings to be zoned. Right? If you configure 7 and 8 buildings to be zoned, that takes a little bit of this away from a K-6 to transition from 6 to 7.
And that's absolutely accurate, because what we noticed this time running the lottery is those roll-up schools, like school number 8, has less seats, World of Inquiry, because it's a good thing that the families are staying in those schools and rolling up to middle school, but then that limits how many seats are available for everybody else.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a really great idea to have maybe that probability, as you suggested, percentage chance, and also, you know, if you live within the zone, the probability of getting that school that's within, you know, a quarter mile of your home, what's the probability of you getting that as well? I do want to say that I think we should be cautious in the language that we use to describe the schools. I think perhaps better wording might have been to say just citywide choices, because I think that, I mean, we could have said any number of schools that might fit that criteria, not just World of Inquiry. So I think that's certainly the case for all of our citywide choices. And then I just think we want to be cautious and not identify particular schools in that way.
I take your point, and I can only think of that one school where literally the sibling preference like takes precedence over everything. And they don't really have a proximity preference, so the sibling preference is the thing.
It could have been Montessori, though, or also like School 15, any of our citywide choices.
I think she just used that as an example.
Montessori isn't highly chosen, that is true. And because it is highly chosen and often chosen more than there are seats available, the percentage is not 100%, right? But it's also not 2%, as it would be for another school. There was one year I was successful at getting the administration to put in the prior year's probabilities into the profile books, the zone profile books. But I had to fight tooth and nail to get those numbers in, and I'm not sure if they continue to be published. It's the right thing to do, but for whatever reason, it's been a hard fight. Commissioner Simmons?
Yes, I'm just thinking about the conversations we've had around neighborhood schools, and I'm thinking sibling preference would probably, if we're talking neighborhood schools and proximity, the sibling, a household is going to want their children to go to the same school.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I just needed to say that out loud.
Sure, and that's why sibling preference and proximity preference both increase your probabilities in the lottery by a significant amount towards your first choice school.
And so then when folks are participating in the lottery, correct me if I misheard you, you're saying they may, because they recognize that they may say, I'm not going to go with that school because I know there's a probability of more siblings getting into that school.
But by the same token, if you're a parent that has sent a first child to school X, in that instance, your second child has an increased opportunity to gain access to that school. In the same way that choosing your neighborhood school increases your chances of success. And it's precisely because our goal is to support neighborhood schools and to keep and make it easier on parents by keeping their kids together, if that is what they choose.
Okay, it was more the latter that I was thinking about, but thank you very much.
Yep. Any other questions on this slide? Or the last slide, rather, I think. Okay, there we go.
So for the students who did not participate in the school choice or for whatever reason might be returning to the district and they come to register at our placement office as a walk-in, they will be assigned to what seat is available in the school in their zone. And also, in red, that means to indicate that it's been modified or changed. Families who move before September 30th will be assigned to a school in their new attendance zone, and students may continue to attend the school of their original assignment until the end of that academic year if the move occurs after September 30th. So our beds day is always the first Wednesday of October, so we want to make sure placements are solidified prior to that. Also, as we talked about last time we were here, families have the ability to request a transfer option once a year, and that will also occur at the same time we're doing the lottery and no later than September 30th. So the voluntary transfer is available May 1st of the following school year, and then we start placing and processing that July 1st, but granting no voluntary transfers after September 30th.
So Dr. Turner, this is for families, second grade go third grade go fourth, and so on.
Yeah, for the voluntary transfer,
Right.
the once-a-year option for voluntary transfer. Keep it in mind that safety transfer, medical and hardship transfers occur throughout the year if they are deemed necessary. Citywide schools are required to recruit students from each of the zones because anybody can attend a citywide, so that no student is denied access to any of our citywide schools, regardless of where they live in a city. In the same token, citywide special education classes that serve relatively few students with disabilities will be located centrally. An example of that is our GEM program or in our 812 programs. So that is accessible to all students who might need those special classes.
I don't see any questions.
Students with disabilities are provided choice as long as there's an appropriate program and services aligned with their IEPs at the school of choice. And parents and guardians of students with disabilities have the opportunity to select the schools that they believe is best suited for their child within that student's attendance zone. So one thing that we're mindful is to make sure that we have those continuums available in each of the zones so that families do not have to travel further and they can stay within those attendance zones as much as possible. And then, of course, our citywide will be able to accommodate those students, right, that might need the special education classes that are not available within their zone. Okay, last but not least, parents and guardians of English language learners will have the opportunity to choose the school that they believe is most educationally appropriate for their child, again, within that school attendance zone.
Any questions on those last couple of slides? Okay, so I want to make sure that we've had a full and robust conversation about the policy. This is, if there are suggestions for different language, this would be the time to present it before we advance it to the full board. Commissioner Malloy?
So I know that managed choice applies to our school programs, but a number of our programs aren't really schools, even though they identify as schools. The best example I can think of would be our North Star program, which is its own school in a way, but it's identified as a program within our district. So we know that the students that attend that don't necessarily live within that zone. And then the same could be said maybe of RIA as well, and that's a program, but it definitely they identify as a separate school. So what impact does managed choice have on those programs?
So I'll start with North Star. North Star is a very specialized program for a very specialized population, right? You're not opting into North Star as a selection. RIA is a newcomer program. We have multiple newcomer programs in K-6. We have 5, 15, 50, as well as RIA. And then for 712, it is really our newcomer program where students should not be there for longer than 18 months before transitioning to a homeschool.
So those students, when they first arrive, don't participate in the managed choice process?
So they're assigned, they'll go back to L's newcomers, right? They're going to have a seat in their zone and get offered a seat in their zone for a program within their zone.
Thank you.
Okay?
I do want to say on the managed choice policy, which it gets, the conversations kind of get intertwined here. It is not a transportation policy, right? Transportation policy is a completely different policy, and the two seem to gel together sometimes, and the conversations come together, but this is really about school choice, school selection.
And to follow up on that, in fact, nothing about transportation rules are changing because of this policy. It's, if they're eligible for transportation, based on the criteria in policy 8400, then, that they'll be considered for it. And if we want to change something about transportation, we need to open up policy 8400. I pray that we don't get too entangled in, because yes, they are tangential, but we need to be considering the choice policy.
Right,
Dr. Jallo?
So I'll leave I won't touch transportation. So my question is to the schools, the high schools that are all city, right, district-wide, that have upper and a lower division. How does managed choice impact those students in the lower school of those schools? Because some schools talk about how those kids are rolled up into their high school, which then limits their seats, which then limits the number of seats available to kids from other parts of the city that might want to go to that school.
So I want to start with this policy, remember, begins with 2425.
Yeah.
And one of the decisions and one of the conversations we had when we presented school reorganizations is that 7, 8 will be separate, that we won't have lower and upper Beggs codes on the same campus, right? We won't mix 7 and 8 and 9, 12s on the same campus. So they will be separate entities once we hit a 7th and 8th grade transition versus a 9, 12.
And so what you're saying is when that happens, based on your proposed reorganization, there won't be, as a rule, there won't be a diminishment of available seats because 8th graders are not like guaranteed a
Correct.
seat in the 9th grade.
There will be no 8th grade rolling up to a high school for an upper and lower configuration.
And middle school will be citywide.
Dr. Turner, was that for general consumption? I couldn't hear you.
Yes. Nope, I take that back. My colleague, yes.
Okay, sidebar, okay.
Yes.
Any other questions? Commissioner LeBron, questions? Concerns? Are there remaining concerns, worries that would cause you not to support this policy? This is the time for the administration to hear them. I don't see any mics going on. Would someone like to, did something come to mind?
I think I'll probably add a few things to the question log a little bit later as I process more of this. I think we're going to see a number of changes as we reconfigure our district as a whole. I do like that we're going to be able to change this at least once per year. We're also going to see a bigger impact with like the pre-kindergarten provision that was put in, or I anticipate that. So I might have questions a little bit later, but I do welcome the changes that we're seeing into this policy.
You make a very good point, Commissioner Malloy, that we're not going to see the real impact of this proposed policy until after the spring lottery next year, which means we're not going to see anything until fall, or, we're not going to hear the complaints until summer and fall of 2024, at which point, if there is a prevailing issue that comes up over and over again, then we open up the policy and address it, right? So, hearing no other concerns, would someone like to make a motion to advance this to the full board?
Motion.
Commissioner
Second.
Patterson moved, Commissioner Malloy second. One last opportunity for comment.
No, I just echo Commissioner Malloy's sentiments. I echo that.
Super. Okay, in that case, we're ready for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously, which bodes well. I hope we can all feel encouraged by that. This was the heavy lift of the night, this policy. Oh, we do have electronic voting if you'll take the time. Yeah, this was the heavy lift of the night. I deliberately kept the agenda clear of all other issues so that we could give it a full airing. We have the survey to complete, and while you're completing the survey, I should tell you that we're being asked to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing matters of concern to the general counsel. If someone would like to make that motion?
Motion.
Second.
Charisma, was it Commissioner Simmons and then Commissioner Malloy? All right. I suppose folks can fill out the survey as we walk out there. Are we going downstairs? Okay. All in favor of adjourning to executive session?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? We stand adjourned. Please finish your survey before you leave your seats, if you don't mind. And I thank you all, and I thank the viewing audience.